Zoran. I'm Senior Solution Virtualization Architect at Skyera company in San Jose. Today I will show you how to configure Windows Server 2012 R2 failover cluster and Microsoft SQL Server 2014 Availability Group for full tolerance, high availability and disaster recovery. First, take a look at the physical diagram. Here in main data center we have two physical server Dell R620 which are connected to Skyhawk iSCSI storage device using two redundant SAN switch. In addition, main data center is connected to a remote disaster recovery site where there is an additional Dell R420 server connected to one Skyhawk storage device. In next diagram you can see in main data center we have two servers that are running Microsoft SQL Server 2014. First we need to add those servers in the Windows failover cluster and then set the availability group. Availability group will be set for automatically failover. It means synchronized replication will be enabled. Microsoft Server 2012 R2 in a remote disaster recovery site also must be a member of the same failover cluster group. This server we will configure as a replication server, but this time with unsynchronized replication. This configuration allows us to fully protect our database even if disaster occur. Let's make this setup. I will start from the storage. In the main data center we have two Skyhawk storage boxes. On the box storage box I have several LANs. For this demo I will use one LAN for SQL files, one LAN for SQL database and one LAN for SQL log files on each storage device. So, okay, let's make the setup. Here are two servers 23 and 21. On both server, cluster service is enabled, and I will use cluster manager to configure Windows failover cluster. But first let's run cluster validation wizard. That is important step. Validation process will check all necessary elements required for cluster. It is very important to pass this test. Special storage validation test and iSCSI persistent reservation support. This process will take some time and I will speed this video to save the time. Okay, validation process is finished. All is okay. I will deselect option to continue with the cluster configuration. I will do that manually. So let's make the cluster. Select hosts for cluster. All cluster hosts needs to be member server joined to Active Directory domain. Give the cluster name. I will simply call SQL cluster. Select cluster network and give the cluster valid IP address. I will uncheck automatically storage configuration. I will do that later and click finish. This process will take some time and I will speed this video to save the time. Okay, cluster is created. Let's see what we have. Because I have unchecked automatically storage configuration, witness disk is not created. We need one witness disk for cluster quorum and I will add one. Okay. Here are many disks qualified for cluster disks and this time I will add only one small disk for my witness disk. Now we have one cluster disk for witness. So let's set up quorum. That is very easy step. So through cluster quorum setup. Alright, I will add and configure witness disk. Take a look at this disk again. You can see this disk is declared now as a witness disk. That's good. Okay, we have witness. Go to SQL Server Management Studio. As you can see, we have two separate SQL Server, each running on separate Windows Server 2012 R2 host. Here is one SQL database, Skyera DB1. That is one benchmark database. I will replicate this database using SQL Server Availability Group, and later we will run benchmark tests to see SQL configuration performance. But first, before you will be able to configure Availability Group, AlwaysOn feature must be enabled on each SQL Server instance. So using SQL Server Configuration Console, I will do that right now. So to take the effect, you need to restart SQL Server service. Okay. One additional task before you create availability group must be finished. Database candidate for availability group must have recent backup. So let's first make backup for database Skyera DB1. It's important to understand backup location needs to be shared location, and both hosts must be able to access to this file share. That's because this backup will be used for initial replication between availability group hosts. I will delete default location and set up my share location for backup files. So give the name for the backup. I will call this backup simple first backup. That's good. Okay, this process will take some times depending on how big your database. I will speed this process to save the time. So backup files is here. We can now configure availability group. Right click on availability group in primary replica server, select new availability group and follow wizard instruction. I will give simple name first availability group. That's okay, because we already have backup for Skyera DB1. This database is a good candidate for availability group. On the SQL Server instance, primary replica is already here. We need to add secondary SQL Server instance as a secondary replica. Because these two instances are on main data center, I will choose automatically failover. In same time, that means synchronize replication. We will be talk about read-only capability later, but now we can set up secondary replica server as read-only SQL Server, available only for read-only client connection. That's interesting. Because both servers are on main data center, I will select full replication and select shared network location previously created for backup file. Here is a quick validation process. So only warning message say we don't have configured listener yet. I will make listener setup later. Okay, click finish and process creating availability group will start. You can track this process in more details tab. Okay, this process will take some time and I will speed this video to save the time. Okay, task to creating availability group is finished, and let's explore this setup in Object Explorer. So same availability group is appear on both SQL Server instance. One is primary, second is secondary. Also same database, Skyera DB1 is on both server instance. Let's show dashboard, one great new tool. In dashboard, we can see almost all information about our availability group. You can see two SQL Server instances with different rule, primary and secondary. Failover node is automatic and database are synchronized. You have to see no data lost in this configuration. If you remember warning message from before, we don't have listener configured. I will configure one. So if you wanna use read only feature, you need to configure listener. I will give simple name, first listener, that's okay. Set port 1433 and set one static IP address for my listener. Okay, after a short time we have a listener configured. Let's back to cluster configuration to check what is changed. So as you can see in the rule node, we have new rule automatically created, of course. That's availability group cluster rule. Back to Management Studio again. You need to do some additional task to take read-only feature running. Here is a several code line you need to make and run. First you need to set up both your SQL Server instance to allow read-only connection. Secondary, you need to tell your instance where need to route read-only connection request on secondary rule and specify path. And finally, because both servers are able to answer on read-only connection, you need to set up priority and tell if you're running primary rule, read-only request will be redirected to secondary instance rule first. Okay, I will execute all my scripts and open new slide. I have previously talked about buffer pool extension. Let's see why this has sense. So physical memory is always bottleneck, especially if you're running your server in a virtual environment where multiple applications require a lot of memory. Extend physical memory on the server is not a simple task in a production environment. You need to shut down your services and server to extend memory. Also, maybe all your memory slots are already full. If you have Skyhawk all flash array enterprise storage, you can simply make one LAN and extend your buffer pool to fast SSD storage. Okay, let's do that. Here's one script you need to make and run on your SQL Server. First, we need to enable buffer pool extension and then specify path on your Skyhawk LAN. I have already created LAN on Skyhawk for buffer pool extension. I will make 700 gigabit from this LAN to extend my buffer pool. So let's do that. After you finish, you can check your buffer pool extension configuration running simple query script. You have to see our buffer pool have 743 gigabytes with extension now. Okay, let's run benchmark performance test to validate performance of this configuration, measuring transaction per minute. I will use HammerDB benchmark test tool. Skyera DB1 is a benchmark database created with 2000 warehouses, and I will be run this test against this database. I will create 300 users and run the test. Don't forget, in this configuration, all transaction first needs to be commit on secondary replica before primary replica commit this data. I said that because this process may cause additional delay, but this delay is acceptable. Our configuration shows excellent result. 3,600,000 transaction per minute is outstanding performance, bearing in mind capacity of the physical server in this configuration. But what about disaster recovery? So take a look on this diagram. We still need to configure disaster recovery site. We need additional replica server on disaster recovery site. With configured availability group, process replication on remote site is almost the same, but this time we will configure unsynchronized replication. So let's do that. To simulate disaster recovery site, I will use my vSphere environment as remote site. Here I have already one virtual machine which running Windows Server 2012 R2 named DRSQL as member server, and Microsoft SQL Server 2014 is already installed on. Okay, back on the cluster manager. The RSQL server also needs to be member of same cluster, same failover cluster. So let's first add this server in the cluster. I will escape cluster validation wizard this time. This process is fast, and this server is already here in cluster. Back to SQL Server Management Studio to add this server in availability group. That will be one secondary rule with unsynchronized replication and manual failover. This process will take some time. And here we go. New secondary replica server is added in availability group. Let's check this server on the disaster recovery location. So as you can see, database is replicated and open for future synchronization. Okay, back to SQL Server Manager Studio. And show dashboard again. You can see 3 SQL Server instances. On main data center, failover is automatic. On disaster recovery side is manual. If disaster happen on a remote site location, you can simply manually make failover. Okay, that's all for this session. Don't forget to visit us on address www.skyera.com for more information about our products. Thanks for watching.